stronger brother has used his freedom to cause the weaker brother to stumble, right? So he's got to guard his life. He can go into the world and he can reach the world, but he's got to be all the time very, very aware that somebody may be watching him and watching him legitimizing whatever kind of behavior he is conducting, and seeing that that behavior is okay for him, plunges into that same behavior without the spiritual strength to cope with what's coming around it, all the trappings. Pretty soon he's sucked right back into the vortex, right back into the hurricane. And here is this well-intentioned, a stronger brother wanting to win some idolater to Christ, and in so doing, he's overstepped the line and caused his brother to stumble, who is weaker. And he says he becomes strengthened in verse 10 to eat things sacrificed to idols because he sees you do it, but through your knowledge, he who is weak has ruined the brother for whose sake Christ died. And thus, by sinning against the brethren and wounding their conscience when it is weak, you sin against Christ. In verse 13, don't do anything to cause your brother to stumble. Now, here we have some limits then. We're going to reach into the world, but there's some limits. And the first limit we see in this particular text is the limit of what might be a liberty expressed that would cause a weaker brother to stumble. So we have to guard the conduct. Yes, we want to reach out to the world. Yes, we want to touch the world. Yes, we want to lead them to Christ. But we have to stop short of a full identification with that lifestyle, which could cause a weaker Christian, thinking he's free to do that, to step into that and plunge into some kind of spiritual disaster.
You're listening to John Macarthur, president of the Master's College and Seminary. Today's lesson on Grace to You is from his study titled The Relationship Danger Zone. Now, keep in mind that you can purchase this practical study as a 4-CD album. It's an ideal addition to your personal library and helpful to go through as a family during devotional times or in a small group Bible study. You can also download all 4 messages free of charge in the MP3 or transcript format from the website gty.org. Pick up a copy of The Relationship Danger Zone as you contact us today. The cost for that 4-CD album is $20, and shipping is free. To order the CDs, call toll-free 1-800-55-GRACE or go online to gty.org. And if you'd like to review the Relationship Danger Zone messages on your computer, smartphone, or tablet, remember you can download them free along with 3,000 other sermons from John in MP3 or transcript format at gty.org. Now, as you tune in to the verse-by-verse teaching here and tap into all of the resources available at our website, keep in mind that Grace to You is a listener-funded ministry. So if you're benefiting from this teaching, know that you can help us take messages like today's into homes and cars and offices here in the United States, as well as Canada, England, Mexico, Argentina, and Singapore. To make a donation, call 1-800-55-GRACE or mail your gift to Grace to You, Post Office Box 4000, Panorama City, California, 91412. Or go online to gty.org. And now for John Macarthur, our broadcast editor Peter Sammons, and the entire staff, I'm Carl Miller. Thanks for tuning in today. Be here again tomorrow for another 30 minutes of unleashing God's truth, one verse at a time, on Grace to You. You never want to risk offending an unbeliever who shows interest in the gospel, or would you? Consider that with John Macarthur on tomorrow's Grace to You.
Holly's a people pleaser. So she walks up to the woman and she says in a very nice tone, very, very nice tone. She's, because I'm watching the whole thing from a distance. And she says, excuse me, did they call zone 1? And the lady looks back at her, I'm watching from a distance, and the lady goes, now, I need to make a few observations here about my own nature that I've learned over the years. Whenever someone disrespects me, I don't do well. When they disrespect my wife, I go BC. You understand? You got the picture? So the woman made this face, this whole face. So I slid over to the scene. Everybody say, don't make a scene. All right, I slid over just to let the woman know that Holly wasn't a solo traveler. To establish the context, you understand? And I said to the woman, not real loud, not real forceful, just said, what's your problem? And the traveling companion with her said, she can't hear. She was hearing impaired. How many relationships have you ruined because you came to a conclusion without understanding the context? I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed. I didn't even know how to apologize. That's one of those where you just drop your head and start over, you know, whatever. But we do it all the time, you know? We do it all the time. We get mad at people for what they say that really isn't an indication of how they feel about us. It's what they're going through within themselves. And so a question, Christian, would be, if the cross is our context for how we relate to God, shouldn't it be the conclusion we come to in how we relate to others? If the basis of my relationship with God is that He had to die for my sins, that He had to shed His blood for my sins, if that's what it took for me to be right with God, shouldn't it be enough for me to be right with others? In the chaos of Christmas, keep your context of compassion, and you will come to a new conclusion. And my conclusion is exactly what the angel said to Joseph. It's one thing that I know no matter what I go through, no matter how it feels, is that He's with me. I think if I could just put the Christmas message in a single 3-word phrase, I would say, you're not alone. You're not alone. It's amazing how lonely you can feel this time of year with a crowd around. It's amazing how lonely you can feel even with people you love gathered around. But the angel showed up to Joseph, who was dealing with all of this in his heart. Remember, he was making a decision. Do I send Mary away or do I bring her home? And when the angel said, you shall call his name Emmanuel, and he shall be called Jesus, he was telling Joseph, watch this, your dilemma is going to be your deliverance. Your dilemma is going to become your deliverance. Jesus came to deliver His people from their sins. And so the angel says to Joseph, and the angel says to you this Christmas, take Mary home. Embrace the chaos and the craziness. Embrace all of it, man. Just, you know, it's not perfect, neither are you. And establish a context in your heart this Christmas. I'm just glad to be here. I'm just glad to be here. And my favorite thing he told me that I want to tell you is it's time for you to jump to a new conclusion. Time for you to jump to a new, you know this phrase, stop jumping to conclusions? Well, I think it's time we started jumping a little higher. jumping past all the junk and the anxiety and the worry. You know how some of y'all are. You worry about everything. Everything. Stomach hurts. It's pancreatic cancer within 3 minutes. I feel it in my pancreas. You know how some of you are. They're 5 minutes late. You got them in a car wreck. They're through the windshield. But by the time you don't get a text message, you know how some of you are. Somebody looks at you one way, and all of a sudden now, did you see how they looked at me? They better not ever look at me like that again. I knew they had something against me. That's just proof right there. You build out a whole conclusion based on an inaccurate context. What if they looked at you funny because their stomach hurt? What if they had pancreatic cancer? What if they just got bad news? What if they're lonely? And I wonder, could you go into Christmas like this?
That's great, yeah. That's great. Strong. So strong.
He took Mary home. Do you know what that cost him? Do you know what people said about him? You know what people thought about him? To be the baby daddy, but not really. Do you know what it would have felt like to wake up next to her and wonder, did an angel really show up? Because she was kind of friendly with Mark. I mean, come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. To embrace a life of faith means that you need a new frame. And so I go into it knowing that God has a purpose in all of this. Did you hear it? It said, all this took place to fulfill what the Lord spoke through the prophet. And I want to declare to you today that everything in your life happened for a reason. I'm not saying God did it, but I'm saying that within the context of redemption, there is nothing that you've been through. There is nothing that you'll go through. There is nothing that people will do to you that God will not somehow get a hold of. And the God who brought hope out of a barn can bring hope out of broken situations in your life this Christmas. If you believe it, get up on your feet right now and let God know, I'm in it for purpose this Christmas. God, I want to see your purpose come to pass. I got a new conclusion. It's that whatever happens to me and whatever doesn't happen for me, that God is overseeing the whole thing. And I'm not going to make a scene.
They dispersed the sons of that crown to different parts of the Lagos area. And they became chiefs and later were elevated to kings in their own right over these various regions. Now, the
term Oba. The term Oba.
Oba means king. Mm-hmm. And in Yoruba land, we have Oba Ile, which is shortened to Oba. And Oba Ile means the king of the land. Then you have the Oba Onru or Bashorun, which is the king of the skies, because there's a spiritual responsibility too. That would be more like your military priesthood. And then you have the Obalogun, the king of iron. That means the implements of war and also some of the implements of farming. But they submit to the Oba Ile. And each regional Oba subscribes to a greater territory or greater territorial leader who would be the Oba of Lagos. And he in turn subscribes to the Oba over all of Yoruba land and all Yoruba people. So there's a structure there, and it dates back to antiquity. I belong to a royal family, and it's interesting that if you trace back through your royal family line as a Yoruba, you will end up with Oduduwa, and his grandfather in our mythology was Nimrod, known in the Yoruba dialect as Lamurudu. And so from Nimrod, we can go all the way back to Adam, and it gives us a sense of pedigree, or should we say apostolic succession. Not necessarily the apostolicity that we would like, but it still gives us a sense of heritage, and it gives us the reminder that we come from a tradition of great city builders, of great leadership. Remember that Nimrod was a Hamitic man, a Cushite, and he was the first builder of cities. He was the first urbanizer of civilization, and his 5 sons were also great city builders. And we built great cities here in Africa. We had great civilization here in Africa, but once Europe had her advent into Africa as a colonial system, they employed this system called damnatia memoria, which is to wipe out all knowledge of our attainments in history, in our ancestry, which neuters us. It emasculates us and gives us a sense that we're a little better than apes sometimes. And when you're divorced that severely from your sense of history, you don't have shoulders to stand on. You once said something to me that, Paul, you have no reason to ever be a failure because you have me. As in, I have a Moses, but you had no Moses. All you had was eyes to see the invisible God. Right. And you talked to him, as in a manner of speaking, face to face, which gave you very direct revelation. But we have the privilege of standing on your shoulders, and he who has no father will not go much further. But when we stand on the shoulders of those who have trodden the path, are running their course in a massive relay, it gives us a sense of direction, a sense of impetus, a sense of antecedent, a sense of rootedness in something that offers us a future. And one of the things we're trying to do with Africa is re-educate Africa with our own curriculum that borrows from the global curriculum, because we still have to participate in global society and civilization, but to also recognize that we too are a people. We are people of great attainment. We led civilization at its beginning, and for quite a while, until maybe 500 years ago. There's much to be said about that. And then rather than absorbing ourselves merely in our tribality, we must begin to look at our nationality. And in dealing with our nationality as Africans or as Nigerians, we want to melt some of our differences without distorting the fact that we are all individually unique. The Berlin Treaty, where Africa was divided up by about 5 colonial master states or master empires, did such immense damage to the African psyche and put us at loggerheads with each other under the principle of divide and rule. And Africa must conquer that by finding her unity in our common creator. I love what America does when America says all men are created equal. She brings God into the Constitution without necessarily calling him by a particular biased nomenclature, so that all men recognize that we have a creator, and he was intentionally a designer in everything that he did. To sort of not talk too much, Bishop, because it's easy to.
No, it's good. No, you're not rattling on. It's very, very good, very, very interesting, and we're gleaning a lot of information. I'm sure our students are going wow, and feverishly writing notes, trying to keep up and dissect things that you take for granted. I've often told you that the things that you take for granted are mysteries unraveled to us. Your normal is very fascinating to us. The way you breeze through your chiefs and your order and your structure is information to us to better understand the complexities and the diversities of the world around us. Because for many of our students, not all, all of us actually, white, black, or brown, root back to Africa, the earliest cradle of civilization. So we're very fascinated to hear what you have to say.
It's interesting, Bishop, to also note that in England, they have a system where the monarchy ruled the land. It ruled the people. And then there was a revolt, and then institutions of government replaced the authority of the royal family, but the royal family was given a special place of dignity and play an important role in the ownership of the military. And Africa's looking for a similar balance without having to mimic the British, because our traditional chiefs held sway in Africa until the colonial masters took authority from them. And the result of that was they became more social as opposed to more governmental. We want to sort of bring them back as not merely an advisory council, but an opinion that matters. Because in our traditions, we take our problems and our challenges to our traditional rulers, because they do have influence, and they have influence because they control that realm. They have influence naturally in this realm because they're the landowners, which means they have resources. They give out leaseholds, sometimes freeholds, and that puts wealth in their hands. And they also have a way of creating sway with the people because as a royal, you're taught to lead by example. As a royal, you're taught through proverbs, much the same way that with Solomon, his father aggregated wise men and their proverbs and had them teach Solomon wisdom from an early age through what we call proverbs. In Yoruba, we call that Owe. And any Yoruba family, as with most other tribal families in Africa, we teach our children by proverbs. For example, we say in the Yoruba tongue, Kaka ki omode pamilayo na to Yoruba, which means it's unheard of that a child will be able to deceive his father. Because when an old man closes his eyes, he's not really sleeping. He's seeing with an inner eye.
Oh, wow.
And so,
the makeup and the dresses they wore was expensive and one of a kind, and they want to make sure when are they getting
I
their
told
check.
them, like I heard Steve say on Sherry Shepherd, that he don't really care for the praise dance team. Even the one that
He did
his
say that.
church, all of them old wannabe gymnastics, ain't never been on a balance beam. If they get up there now, it won't be no more beam.
Anyway,
They were the first ones to have uneven parallel bars at the playground. But one of them weighed too much and just made one of the bars uneven.
that's Church Complaints for today with Reverend Motown and Deacon Def Jam. Now, coming up next, it is Ask the CLO with our Chief Love Officer, Steve Harvey, right after this.
You're listening to the Steve Harvey Morning Show.
In 1967, Joseph Stalin's only daughter flees Russia for her new home, America.
Hello to everybody. I am very happy to be here.
That story alone is worthy of a podcast, but Svetlana is about what comes next, and it's the craziest story I've ever heard. It has KGB agents, a Frank Lloyd Wright commune, weird sex stuff, 3 Olgas, 2 Svetlanas, and 1 neurotic gay playwright. That's me. Listen to Svetlana on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
In 2018, it was reported there was a dramatic rise in the number of cases of demonic possession. For many of the most disturbing cases, Father Carlos Martins was often summoned.
I have seen things, very evil things.
I order you to go in the name of Christ.
I'm not leaving. We've been together too long. He needs me.
Listen to The Exorcist Files on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Paper Ghosts is a true crime podcast investigating the mysterious disappearance and brutal, unsolved murder of Tammy Zawicki.
They just kept telling us from the beginning, she'll be back, she'll be back.
We had no clue where she was. Didn't know where to begin looking.
Tammy's story shocked the nation. The deeper I searched, the more troubling things I found.
The best lead, the best evidence, the best witness was blown off.
Listen to Paper Ghosts on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite shows.
Is so much stronger than the Ukrainian military writ large that the odds remain high that the Russian military will be able ultimately to overwhelm the Ukrainian defenses and take control of Kyiv and so forth. I don't want to offer an optimistic take here because we're still early days in this war and the power imbalance is just so great. But that having been said, I would never have expected to be sitting here 4 days into the Russian military operation with Russian troops just messing around on the outskirts of Kyiv, just finally getting into Kharkiv and struggling all up and down. I would never have expected that to happen, except that we did expect it to be a mess when they tried to do an invasion with the force packages that they had put together, especially those that are attacking Kyiv and Kharkiv. So a few things have gone on. One is this was a stupid way of preparing for an invasion if you were serious about an invasion. I give you all.
In what way? Yeah, give some details. I think that'd be interesting.
So here's the thing. Mechanized maneuver warfare is a very complicated undertaking.
Logistically.
Well, yes, logistically, but even more than that in terms of command and control. when you are a commander and you've got multiple battalions, mechanized battalions, moving down multiple axes of advance, sort of driving down different roads to different targets rapidly, keeping track of all of that is very hard. Understanding what they're doing is very hard. Figuring out how to support them is very hard. They need artillery support. They need air support. They do need logistics support. You need to tell them what to do as they get to particular, or as they run into problems. It's a lot of burden on a commander to keep track of a lot of subordinates. So the solution for, as long as there's been mechanized warfare, is that you build forces where you never have more than 2 or 3 or maximum 4 direct subordinate units like that. So battalions get grouped into regiments or brigades, which are at the same echelon in an organizational structure. And there will be not more than 4 maneuvering battalions or mechanized battalions within a mechanized regiment or a mechanized brigade. And then brigades and regiments get grouped into divisions. So there's not going to be more than 3 or 4 brigades or regiments in a division. And then the divisions are grouped into larger organizations. And this is the way the US military is organized, and it's the way the Russian military is organized formally. But the weird thing is that when they put these masses of forces into Belarus and into Western Russia that are now attacking Kyiv, and when they built up forces opposite Kharkiv, they didn't move entire regiments or brigades, let alone entire divisions. They pulled individual battalion, what they call battalion tactical groups, BTGs. They pulled individual BTGs from all across Russia. The guys in Belarus actually came from 10 or 15 different regiments and brigades in the Russian Far East.
And did they do that to not weaken those divisions and brigades where they were already located?
No, because all the stuff in Belarus is coming in a place where the Russians don't need to worry about. The Chinese are not invading the Russian Far East, so the Russians could have taken whole regiments or brigades from the Far East if they'd wanted to, and they didn't. I can offer various technical explanations for why they might not have. But the point is that they put together what we're calling just sort of collection of cats and dogs of battalions wung together from a whole bunch of other parent units, not organized coherently, even on the spot, as far as we can tell, into clear regiment, brigade structures and all like that. And then they just sort of told them, go down, drive down the road and go take Kyiv. Okay, that gets you the kind of mess that they have now, where they tried it, individual battalion tactical groups drive down and then they get stopped, but then there's not a good coordination so that there's not an immediate other battalion that can take over and flank and keep the attack moving. There are all kinds of ways of dealing with the defenses the Ukrainians are putting up, and the Russians are not using them. And I think that has a lot to do with the organization of the Russian forces. It was just crazy as an organization for a mechanized operation like this.
And then Putin assumed that just brute force numbers in some sense would overcome that.
Possibly.
That disarray in organizational structure.
Possibly, but I think another answer goes to your second question. The Ukrainians are fighting like lions. They are fighting like heroes. It's unbelievable, the determination with which I thought they would fight. I mean, I know Ukrainians, and I thought that they would fight. They are fighting hard and effectively. I'm certain that Putin did not expect them to.
Okay, so he's having a lot more trouble locally than he might have expected for a multitude of reasons.
Right.
Poor organization to begin with, which seems in keeping with the notion that the troops were put there as an intimidation rather than as a reliable military force for an invasion. Yep, sure. All this is provisional. And also the Ukrainians are entrenching and fighting back with a ferocity that was unexpected. They have more to lose in some sense than the Russians have to gain. So that's always dangerous. That's a dangerous inequality in morality in warfare, and that's not to be underestimated. And so what's happening on the international front in response to the cohesiveness of the response to the invasion?
This has been very heartening, and it goes to one of the other reasons why I thought Putin wouldn't do this, because the international community is rallying. And we can have frustrations with the way individual states are responding to specific requests and so forth, and I have been frustrated by that, as everybody else has been. But the truth is, if you get out of the time-dilated world we're in which if something doesn't happen 5 seconds from now, then it's taking a long time, we're talking about within 3 to 4 days, we've got the Russians being partially kicked out of SWIFT. We've got sanctions on the Russian central bank. We've got the Germans, for the first time since the Second World War, directly sending lethal aid to the Ukrainians. We've got virtual unanimity in condemning the Russian attack.
Are there any exceptions?
Yes.
And I want to go back to SWIFT as well.
Okay, yes, there are exceptions. Bashar al-Assad continues to demonstrate what an evil slimeball he actually is and how much he owes the Russians, because he immediately recognized the Russian recognition of Donbass, of Donetsk and Luhansk.
And for those that don't know, he is
the dictator of Syria, who has been conducting his own little genocide there with Russian active assistance.
Right, so he's just the kind of ally you'd hope the Russians would have.
Exactly. I haven't tracked this. I think the Venezuelans have made good noises. Again, when Maduro's on your side, you ought to be thinking hard about your life choices. And the Iranian, what they call the axis of resistance, I think, was very prompt in recognizing the recognition of republics. And the Iranians are generally focused on blaming NATO for the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But other than that, even Xi Jinping could not bring himself to veto the UN Security Council resolution condemning the invasion. He just abstained.
Hi, my name's Father Mike Schmitz, and you're listening to the Bible in a Year podcast, where we encounter God's voice and live life through the lens of Scripture. The Bible in a Year podcast is brought to you by Ascension. Using the Great Adventure Bible timeline, we'll read all the way from Genesis to Revelation, discovering how the story of salvation unfolds and how we fit into that story today. This is day 32. Let's keep on rolling through this. Day 32, we're going to be reading from Exodus chapter 9, from Leviticus chapter 7, easy for me to say, Leviticus chapter 7, and Psalm 49. As always, I am reading from the Revised Standard Version, the Catholic edition. In fact, I'm using the Great Adventure Bible from Ascension. If you want to have your own Bible reading plan, you can download that for free from ascensionpress.com/Bible in a Year. So ascensionpress.com/Bible in a Year. Today, as I said, we're going through Exodus chapter 9. We're going to continue by reading more of the plagues. We have not got through all of them yet. We're kind of right smack dab in the middle of them with Exodus chapter 9. Exodus chapter 9. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go into Pharaoh and say to him, 'Thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go, that they may serve me. For if you refuse to let them go and still hold them, behold, the hand of the Lord will fall with a very severe plague upon your cattle, which are in your field, the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds, and the flocks. But the Lord will make a distinction between the cattle of Israel and the cattle of Egypt, so that nothing shall die of all that belongs to the sons of Israel.' And the Lord set a time, saying, 'Tomorrow the Lord will do this thing in the land.' And the next day the Lord did this thing. All the cattle of the Egyptians died, but of the cattle of the sons of Israel, not one died. And Pharaoh sent, and behold, not one of the cattle of the Israelites was dead. But the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, 'Take handfuls of ashes from the kiln, and let Moses throw them toward heaven in the sight of Pharaoh, and it shall become fine dust over all the land of Egypt, and become boils breaking out in sores on man and beast throughout all the land of Egypt.' So they took ashes from the kiln and stood before Pharaoh. And Moses threw them toward heaven, and it became boils breaking out in sores on man and beast. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils were upon the magicians and upon all the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had spoken to Moses. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Rise up early in the morning, and stand before Pharaoh, and say to him, Thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go that they may serve me. For this time I will send all my plagues upon your heart and upon your servants and your people, that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. For by now I could have put forth my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, and you would have been cut off from the earth. But for this purpose have I let you live, to show you my power, so that my name may be declared throughout all the earth. You are still exalting yourself against my people, and will not let them go. Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause very heavy hail to fall, such as never has been in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. Now therefore, get your cattle, and all that you have in the field into safe shelter, for the hail shall come down upon every man and beast that is in the field, and is not brought home, and they shall die. Then he who feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his slaves and his cattle flee into the houses. But he who did not regard the word of the Lord left his slaves and his cattle in the field. And the Lord said to Moses, Stretch forth your hand toward heaven, that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, upon man and beast and every plant of the field throughout the land of Egypt. Then Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire ran down to the earth. And the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. There was hail, and fire flashing continually in the midst of the hail, very much hail, such as has never been in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. The hail struck down everything that was in the field throughout all the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and the hail struck down every plant of the field, and shattered every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the sons of Israel were, there was no hail. Then Pharaoh sent and called Moses and Aaron and said to them, I have sinned this time. The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. Entreat the Lord, for there has been enough of this thunder and hail. I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer. Moses said to him, As soon as I have gone out of the city, I will stretch out my hands to the Lord. The thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, that you may know that the earth is the Lord's. But as for you and your servants, I know that you do not yet fear the Lord God. The flax and the barley were ruined, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was in the bud. But the wheat and the spelt were not ruined, for they are late in coming up. So Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh, and stretched out his hands to the Lord, and the thunder and the hail ceased, and the rain no longer poured upon the earth. But when Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunder had ceased, he sinned yet again, and hardened his heart, he and his servants. So the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the sons of Israel go, as the Lord had spoken through Moses. The book of Leviticus, chapter 7. This is the law of the guilt offering. It is most holy. In the place where they kill the burnt offering, they shall kill the guilt offering, and its blood shall be thrown on the altar round about. And all its fat shall be offered, the fat tail, the fat that covers the entrails, the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them at the loins, and the appendage of the liver, which he shall take away with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as an offering by fire to the Lord. It is a guilt offering. Every male among the priests may eat of it. It shall be eaten in a holy place. It is most holy. The guilt offering is like the sin offering. There is one law for them. The priest who makes atonement with it shall have it. And the priest who offers any man's burnt offering shall have for himself the skin of the burnt offering which he has offered. And every cereal offering baked in the oven, and all that is prepared on a pan or a griddle, shall belong to the priest who offers it. And every cereal offering mixed with oil or dry shall be for all the sons of Aaron, one as well as another. And this is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which one may offer to the Lord. For if he offers it for a thanksgiving, then he shall offer it with the thank offering, unleavened cakes mixed with oil, unleavened wafers spread with oil, and cakes of fine flour, well mixed with oil. With the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving, he shall bring his offering with cakes of leavened bread. And of such he shall offer 1 cake from each offering, as an offering to the Lord. It shall belong to the priest who throws the blood of the peace offerings, and the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving shall be eaten on the day of his offering. He shall not leave any of it until the morning. But if the sacrifice of his offering is a votive offering or a free will offering, it shall be eaten on the day that he offers his sacrifice. And the next day what remains of it shall be eaten. But what remains of the flesh of the sacrifice on the 3rd day shall be burned with fire. If any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offerings is eaten on the 3rd day, he who offers it shall not be accepted, neither shall it be credited to him.